Hi, everybody. This is the VTmtss office hours for educational support teams, the secondary model. I'm Michelle Harchie, and I work on the VTmtss team in the Student Support Services Division with Tom Ferris.
Hi, and I'm Tom Ferris. We'd like to begin our presentation today with our belief statement. The Vermont MTSS team is committed to the belief that each and every student can learn and achieve high standards. We believe that establishing interconnected, interrelated, systemic approaches creates equitable conditions to sustain a dynamic, responsive educational system. We believe that our role is to help school and district staff build capacity in collaboration with each other, students, families, and community to strive towards equity of educational opportunity. This presentation will include information about the regulations governing educational support teams, reporting requirements, supplementary guidelines for secondary schools, and information for further technical assistance and support.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to review the education regulation that supports educational support teams, so it falls under Title 16. And we won't go through all of this, but there will be links in along with this recording so that you can access this information if you'd like to. But I'd really like to highlight that the tiered system of supports shall at a minimum include an educational support team, instructional and behavioral interventions, and accommodations that are available as needed for any student who requires support beyond what can be provided in the general education classroom, and may include intensive individualized interventions for any student requiring a higher level of support. So educational support teams are grounded in our education legislation in Vermont. And there is a reporting requirement under Section 2904, and this just correlates to the VTmtss survey that we send out, and we just wanted to highlight this information as we begin this office hour today.
So educational support teams are situated within the Vermont MTSS framework, as in fact are all elements of the school system. So we'd like to take a moment just to give a higher level overview of what do we mean by the VTMTSS framework. The VTMTSS framework is a conceptual model for understanding how school systems work. The framework is intended to provide common language that describes components that have specific functions but are also connected. Any work in a school system should include consideration of the contributions and needs of each component as well as their interactions. At the center of the model is a systemic and comprehensive approach. This hub holds the model together, strengthening, coordinating, and serving each component. High-quality instruction and assessment, expertise, and collaboration are all familiar areas in education, but the VTMTSS framework involves expanding and interactive dimensions to these components that encourage deeper exploration and understanding. The 5 components are central to a dynamic culture of continuous improvement and ongoing decision-making for excellence and equity. The framework does not sit still. The metaphors that best describe the framework involve living organisms or ecosystems. Its purpose is to help us act with intention while keeping balance. This is how we plan to engage in the work before us. So the EST is a team that functions within a robust Vermont MTSS system. EST referrals are done when the unique needs of students are over and above what is typically provided within the general education system. The EST structures must always be in support of the general ed system and do not supplant first or universal instruction. The educational support team is at least focused on systemic improvement as much as it is on individual student deficit. There may be a tendency to confound the EST with the tiered system of Vermont MTSS. VTMTSS is a framework that defines an entire educational system, while EST is one element within that educational system. The EST is a team that follows processes to support students and to enhance the Vermont MTSS framework. With the passage of Act 173 in 2018, ESTs have become a prominent feature in implementing the Act. The AOE has created a document to outline preliminary technical guidance around the role of EST in relation to Act 173. The AOE collects data around the usage and efficacy of EST within the Vermont MTSS survey submitted annually from each school in Vermont. Some general considerations for the EST process. First, students learn differently and make meaning of and demonstrate their learning differently. Teachers, in collaboration with their peers and in support with other specialists, can support the great majority of students to achieve and demonstrate proficiency. Sometimes, despite best efforts from teachers, a student will have persistent challenges with basic skills or the application of basic skills to a subject. If this is not due to an identified disability, an EST plan may be implemented to address this. An EST plan is not a placement. It is intended to be time limited and directed towards specific, measurable outcomes.
So we're going to get into some supplemental guidelines. Educational support teams provide early systematic assistance to struggling students by connecting them to appropriate interventions and supports. At the secondary school level, ESTs can be a lever for positively impacting high school graduation rates. This is a brief overview of the different variations in configuration for middle and high schools across Vermont. When we think about middle schools, there are many differences in the grade span and how they're structured and organized and the location. At EST at the middle school level can be quite different across systems. Some models follow traditional EST structures, while others need to adapt to the many different class schedules and routines that middle school students might have. In the high school, EST models are often context driven and may vary in purpose based on local student needs. High schools can offer broadened supports through ESTs that may include monitoring progress, developing interventions and services for students that are navigating a variety of educational opportunities available in that environment. When we're thinking about the different staffing and resources, geographic areas across the state, socioeconomic differences, population, workforce, and availability of community supports, and so much more when we think about the secondary school environments across Vermont. We're going to go into some information about recommendations in the high school approach, and we also want to collaborate and learn from our educators that we support. So please reach out to our team. We'll give you some information at the end on how to connect with us. But we know that in the high school environment, there's a consideration of credits towards graduation, proficiency levels, personalized learning plans. In the high school, there is likely a dedicated EST coordinator. This position would set agendas, ensure that meeting minutes and data are maintained, communicate with families and school staff. In a large high school, this could be a full-time position. In smaller schools, it might combine with other part-time positions, such as a school counselor or 504 coordinator. The identified EST members should have a meeting time that's built into the master schedule. EST includes staff from different academic departments. At a minimum, we would like to see English and mathematics, but there's also an important need to collaborate with specialists and other school providers. Information could be discussed about students in what we might call a pre-EST or just general routines prior to referral to EST through regular department or PLC meetings. And it should include a dedicated time to review and problem solve student concerns. Concerns that are not resolved at this level are brought to EST by an EST member in the department or from the PLC or through consultation with the EST coordinator. Gathering both student and family input throughout the process is essential. When we think about EST services in the secondary environment, we need to schedule time for student interventions. Thinking creatively, this might include study periods, intervention periods, the zero period that occurs before or just after school. We want to identify students with a need for an intervention or additional instruction and match that targeted instruction and intervention to those needs. It could be delivered either in an individual or group setting. And just as a reminder, an EST plan is a short-term intensive instructional plan that can be faded to less intensive supports in the regular classroom. So the idea is if we understand that a student needs a certain intervention or support, and if we're tracking that intervention and seeing progress, then we would work with our colleagues to implement that support or accommodation in the classroom setting. And we know that based on special education law, if there is a suspected disability, we would never stop that process. So that all of those laws are in place regardless of what happens in the EST process. When we're measuring EST outcomes, we want to monitor the implementation and student progress to ensure the instruction was provided with fidelity and to determine if the intensity or frequency would need to be changed throughout this EST intervention. We want to review the intervention outcomes through the EST process, which is generally a meeting, collaboration with colleagues. And we would determine if those supports were helping the student to access learning, which would mean the student could be exited from EST, or if an evaluation for a disability or a referral for special education evaluation is needed. Effective and accessible record keeping is essential for our EST plans, and we want to regularly reflect on the effectiveness of your EST process across the school building and across the district. Next, Tom's going to talk a little bit more about student engagement.
Thanks, Michelle. So student engagement is highly recommended or perhaps even essential for all students in all EST situations, but it's particularly important at the high school level where we're talking about working with young adults. So we recommend a process that intentionally focuses on their engagement with the EST process and feel that this can add a lot of power and effectiveness to the entire EST process. We recommend that you find a dedicated and intentional time to talk with students before the EST plan is made, in making the EST plan, to develop the plan, including the student-centered goals, and outline the types of support that students feel that they need. It would be preferable to have a trusted adult facilitate this conversation, somebody that the student is comfortable talking with and feels that they can be fairly open in sharing what their perspective is on the issue that's brought about the EST referral. Teacher and student engagement time should be a part of all EST goals. And there should be a periodic review of the EST plan with the student so that they have a sense of what kind of progress they're making and that they have input on determining whether that progress is sufficient or if there are other things that could or should be tried. There are other factors that are critical for a successful EST. And to address this, I'm going to quote some information directly from the VTmtss field guide. The system has to support the work. It cannot be the case, for example, that teachers are asked to make some curricular change, but there's no time to learn how to do this. Similarly, it cannot be the case that staff are expected to collaborate but have no protected time to meet. The infrastructure mechanisms must support new policy directions as they're transmitted into appropriate daily operations. So this is really referring to the requirement that administration, that the systemic and comprehensive oversight of the school system really support this work and deliberately and intentionally find time to make this happen. One of the most challenging issues for any organizational system is how to find the time to engage in the discussion, decision making, and work required to improve outcomes for students, families, and the community. Even with help, change comes slowly. In my experience, the scarcest resource in the change process, even more than money, is time. Time for teachers to discuss students' needs, observe one another's classes, assess their work, design new curriculums, visit other schools, and attend workshops. Time for teachers and students to get to know one another. Time for parents and community members to become involved in the children's learning. Time for leaders at all levels to reflect and to plan collaboratively. Time, perhaps 5 years, to rethink the purposes of education, reinvent teaching and learning, and create new school cultures. One of the reasons that this is particularly relevant at the high school level is that high school scheduling, as we know, takes place well in advance of the school year. So that beginning, say, is as early as January or certainly by February or March, planning schedules for the coming year. This is a key place for the school administration to show support for the EST process and to intentionally create the time and hold that time sacred for the EST process to work. There are other student concerns that may come in front of the EST, and we wanted to touch on that briefly. High school EST will also encounter student concerns related to mental health, substance use, and/or social and emotional well-being. These are likely to require longer-term individual support and are not typically appropriate for the type of short-term specific plan that ESTs develop. They may also involve sensitive personal information that's not appropriate to share with a large group. The EST may, however, have a role if these difficulties stem from a student's instructional challenges. However, the EST should be prepared to recommend or refer to other possible supports. There may be other places where these student concerns overlap or interface with student learning or some of the short-term measurements, but there are certainly some types of student concerns that are simply too long-term and too personal to really be effectively addressed through the EST process. So in summary, high school EST. First, plan your EST in advance and schedule the members to meet regularly. Look for existing team meetings and ensure that they include time for database discussion of student concerns. So these are meetings outside of the EST. These could be PLCs, they could be department meetings. Wherever you have an opportunity for discussing student data and student concerns, try to incorporate that as a part of your regular process. Use members from these teams to staff the EST. Meet with students who are referred to the EST to discuss the concern, share the data, and get their perspective on what might help. Have space and staffing available to provide supports. And work on specific concerns with specific objectives.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody for watching this office hour video presentation on educational support teams in the secondary environment. Here's our contact information. You'll get a link to the webpage where we have guidance about the educational support teams process. We'll be supplementing that information with some of the information that we presented here today, and we'd love to hear from you. Please contact the VTmtss team if you have any questions or would like to share any information about your process. And we welcome your feedback, and we love to work with you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.